the TV was airing a news segment, with the anchor reporting that it had been nearly a year since the CEO of DM Financial Investments, Chairman Nielsu, vanished after absconding with a substantial sum of money from investors' funds and loans. Despite the time that had passed, authorities were still investigating, holding on to hope that they would eventually locate the chairman. Some speculated he had fled to another country. Investors who had lost varying amounts, from small to large sums, were demanding a swift investigation and his arrest. The police had reached out to international agencies, urging them to issue a red notice immediately to aid in their efforts. Meanwhile, on a mobile screen, the same news report played as a bottle of alcohol, a glass, and other items sat on a nearby table. A man was seen consuming these items, with the ocean gently rolling and a boat floating in the background. This man was none other than Chairman Nielsu, the former CEO of DM Financial Investments, who listened to the report with a smirk. He muttered to himself about the pointlessness of the gossip, feeling satisfied that the deceived were fools while he, the clever one, had taken all the money. He chuckled, sipped from his glass, and continued to revel in his perceived triumph. It was nighttime, and Nielsu was sound asleep on his boat. As he lay in deep slumber, a voice suddenly called out from behind, "Chairman Nielsu, wake up." Startled, he awoke to find a man in a suit sitting on a chair in front of him. Nielsu quickly sat up, shocked, and stared at the man across from him. The man then asked, "Are you still content, stealing people's money and sailing the world on this luxurious yacht?" Nielsu, still in disbelief, demanded, "Who are you?" The man stood and began approaching him, saying, "Have you forgotten my voice? I was already deeply disappointed in you before." Nielsu suddenly recognized the man and uttered, "Kim Muyuk. Director Kim Muyuk, is that you?" As Muyuk moved closer to the bed, Nielsu raised a hand to stop him, but Muyuk continued, saying, "Chairman Nielsu, I'm here to collect the debt you owe to Taesan Capital." Nielsu, confused, asked, "Director Kim, what are you talking about?" Then, panicking, he began shouting for security. But when he looked outside, he saw all the guards either lying on the ground or slumped against the walls, clearly overpowered. Muyuk calmly told him, "Relax, Chairman. We're not here to take you back to Korea. We're only here to collect our money." He then showed Nielsu a mobile phone screen displaying figures and explained, "The principal is 150 billion won, the pending annual interest is 320 billion won, and the total amount you need to deposit is 470 billion won. Nielsu was stunned, exclaiming, 470 billion won? He looked closer at the phone and, calculating quickly, said, "At today's exchange rate, that's $358 million. You expect me to deposit $358 million? Desperate, Nielsu began pleading, "I don't have that much money. I spent it all on this yacht, and now there's nothing left." He shouted in frustration, "This is absurd. The principal has doubled. You people are thieves. If you want something, take this yacht. I don't want it anymore." Muyuk, holding his head in disbelief, stared at Nielsu with a strange expression, wondering what the chairman was thinking. That night, as darkness enveloped the scene, a chain hung over the sea. Director Kim Muyuk stood at the edge of the quay, a cigarette dangling from his lips, while an assistant stood silently behind him. The driver, seated inside the boat, was instructed to lift the chain. As the chain rose, Chairman Nielsu was hoisted out of the sea, drenched and shivering, his gaze fixed angrily on Muyuk. Muyuk, cold and composed, detailed Nielsu's investments: 200 million won in a shell company in Malta, 150 million won in the Virgin Islands, and 120 million won in Switzerland. He demanded to know where these funds were. Bound and soaked, Nielsu claimed ignorance, insisting his only remaining asset was the yacht. Unmoved, Muyuk continued, noting that Nielsu could use the yacht's satellite internet to transfer the money directly from his laptop. Nielsu, distressed, protested his inability to return the funds. Muyuk, with a cold edge, stated that no money would be returned and suggested Nielsu would become fish food instead. Desperate, Nielsu declared he would rather die than be left with nothing. He agreed to deposit the principal amount of 150 billion won but refused to pay the interest, accusing Muyuk of profiting unfairly. Muyuk allowed the agents to lower Nielsu back into the sea. Following Muyuk's orders, the agents resumed their task. Nielsu cried out, pleading for them to stop. Moments later, he sat in front of his laptop while Muyuk checked his phone. Confirming the deposit of $350 million, Muyuk smiled slightly, bowed his head, and thanked Nielsu for using Taesan Capital. Fury consumed Nielsu as he glared at Muyuk, feeling his hard-earned money had been unjustly taken. Despite his anger, Muyuk maintained his composure and, with a smile, mentioned that Nielsu could contact them again if needed. Muyuk then boarded his yacht and departed, leaving Nielsu seething as he watched the yacht fade into the distance. As Nielsu glanced back, he saw another yacht emerging from the sea, its lights piercing the darkness. The intensity of the lights caused Nielsu to open his eyes in shock. He realized several more yachts had surrounded his vessel, their lights focused menacingly on him. An authoritative voice announced they were the Philippine Coast Guard, acting on an Interpol red notice requested by the Korean police. They warned Nielsu not to resist, threatening to open fire if he did. Filled with rage, Nielsu watched as the patrol boats moved closer, surrounding his yacht and escalating the situation to a critical point. In a large house adorned with a prominent picture, several individuals gathered around a table. Chairman Cheon Suman of Taesan Capital praised Director Muyuk for his excellent work, offering him a drink. Muyuk declined, stating he had merely followed instructions and company policies. Chairman Cheon commended Muyuk for locating Nielsu and recovering the interest. Vice Chairman Cheon Suhan expressed his gratitude, acknowledging the significant achievement of recovering 470 billion won. Chairman Cheon Suman's eldest son, Cheon Jaiwon, observed silently, nodding in approval. The chairman reiterated that Muyuk was the only person they could truly trust. Muyuk modestly insisted he had simply done his job. The chairman then urged Muyuk to call him uncle, emphasizing their familial bond. Vice Chairman Cheon Suhan laughed, noting that Muyuk was the only son of his beloved sister, Cheon Nizyan. The chairman reminded everyone of their shared bloodline, signifying their unity. The group then turned their attention to the large picture behind the chairman, reflecting on their family's legacy. The man in the picture was Chairman Cheon Suman's father, Cheon Tae-san. Chairman Cheon recalled how elites had once sought money from him, bowing their heads. Known as the wealthiest man in South Korea, Cheon Tae-san controlled shark loan industries, earning him the title of Loan Shark King. His wealth was vast, encompassing cash, investments, stocks, real estate, and foreign funds, all known only to him. Muyuk looked around, holding a drink, and felt a deep sense of loss. Despite his efforts, he had been left with nothing, while the fortune remained confined to Cheon Suman, Cheon Suwon, and their families. Chairman Cheon questioned his son, Jaiwon, about his recent absence and failure to locate CEO Yoon, who had embezzled funds from an apartment construction project. Jaiwon acknowledged the issue but had yet to act. Frustrated, Chairman Cheon expressed his disappointment, citing Jaiwon's past failures and drug-related mishaps. Despite his father's harsh words, Muyuk was told to rest after his hard work. He agreed and left the mansion, reflecting on the 30 years that had passed and the exhaustion he felt. Despite taking on every task the family assigned him, he had not become a true part of the family. As he sat in his car, he glanced at his phone and saw a calendar reminder of his grandmother's death anniversary. The sadness of remembering her and the 30 years since her passing weighed heavily on him. He stopped by a shop to buy some items and was about to leave when his phone rang. The assistant informed him that CEO Yoon had been found and that the chairman had ordered his immediate capture, despite Jaiwon's responsibility for the task. Muyuk was surprised and headed to the location immediately. He arrived at the construction site and called Sengi to confirm his location. Seeing people approaching with sticks, Muyuk grew alarmed. The crowd formed a circle around him, preparing to attack. Enraged, Muyuk shouted, "What are you doing? Where is Park Sengi?" Meanwhile, Park Sengi stood with a cigarette in hand, smiling at him, and said, "Chief, I'm sorry I called you so late." Muyuk was stunned and demanded, "Who do you think you are?" At that moment, a car approached and collided with Muyuk, knocking him to the ground. As he got up, he saw a stick being swung towards him but managed to dodge it. He quickly retaliated, striking one of his attackers, who fell to the ground. He fought off a second attacker similarly and left him on the ground. The remaining people continued to advance on him, and Muyuk fought them off fiercely. Despite his efforts, he was overwhelmed, and as he was being beaten, he looked angrily at Sangi and shouted, "You bastard!" As he was being beaten, someone struck him hard in the face with a stick, causing him to collapse. Injured and with his eyes open, he found himself bound with ropes inside a locked vehicle. A bit of blood was visible on his hands, and he wondered in disbelief, "What is happening?" As he looked forward, he was startled to find himself staring at a car perched precariously on the edge of the road extension, its front facing the sea, teetering dangerously close to the edge. Muyuk, glaring at Sangi, shouted, "What are you doing? Get me out of here." Sangi replied, "I received orders to retire you now." Furious, Muyuk demanded, "Who gave the orders? The chairman? Cheon So-won? Or Ji-won?" Sangi calmly stated, "It doesn't matter who gave the orders. You know we are just servants. We do what we are told." Muyuk glared at him in anger, but Sangi continued, "Goodbye, chief." The rope securing the track was undone, causing the track's extension to fall towards the sea. The car was pushed in the same direction, plummeting into the ocean. Muyuk screamed, "Stop! Don't do this!" But it was too late, the car sank into the sea. Struggling in the water, Muyuk thought, "Am I going to die like this? After being so loyal to the Cheon family, I can't believe I'm ending up like this." As he submerged, he held his breath, looking at a box floating in the water, encased in a cloth bag. He thought, "Grandmother, forgive me. I promised to take care of your memorial service, but now I'm on my way to join you." Suddenly, morning arrived, and he found himself on the beach, the sun shining brightly. He wondered, "What's happening? Am I still alive?" Just then, another person kicked him, causing him to fall again. As he got up, the person continued to beat him. Amid the chaos, Muyuk thought, "Is heaven also in chaos?" Muyuk engaged in a fierce fight with the boy, delivering powerful punches and kicks. He then threw the boy into the shallow water on the beach, expressing his anger with a commanding gesture. As the two boys approached, Muyuk glared at them and landed a strong kick to one's stomach, causing him to fly through the air. Another boy tried to confront Muyuk, but he was dispatched in the same forceful manner, leaving both boys sprawled on the ground. The remaining onlookers, bewildered by the scene, murmured in astonishment. Muyuk continued to overpower his attackers, using both his hands and feet to strike their ribs with relentless force. The last two boys, paralyzed by fear as they observed Muyuk's furious eyes, remained silent. Terrified, they eventually scrambled to their feet and fled the scene. Exhausted, Muyuk sat on the ground, lost in contemplation. Suddenly, another boy approached from behind and taunted the fleeing group, challenging them to return and fight again. Turning his attention to Muyuk, the boy told him that he had come to flirt with girls but only boys were present. He then inquired about Muyuk's well-being and offered him a smoke, noting Muyuk's sweat. Muyuk, recognizing the boy's high schooler status from his shirt, realized he was Lee Myung-soo, his best friend from middle school. As Muyuk sat down, another boy put his arm around his shoulder in a friendly manner, acknowledging how Muyuk was still as skilled at fighting as ever, capable of handling everything on his own. The boy was Park Hyun-sung, a close friend from middle school who had always taken care of Muyuk whenever he got into trouble, especially since his father was in the police. Muyuk, confused, looked at both boys and questioned where they were. Lee Myung-soo, his best friend from middle school, responded with concern. He told Muyuk that it was Gwangali. Myung-soo grabbed Muyuk's head and said, "What's wrong with you? You're suddenly using the Seoul dialect and asking about this place. Did they hit your head too hard?" He began inspecting Muyuk's head and remarked, "It seems perfectly fine, solid as a rock." As Muyuk tried to make sense of his situation, he wondered what year and date it was. Myung-soo informed him that it was September 21, 1990. Lost in deep thought, Muyuk repeated the date to himself, realizing that somehow, he had come back 30 years into the past. Muyuk then noticed a balloon flying in the sky with a banner attached to it, and cars moving through the city. Meanwhile, Hyun-sung, who was getting up from the ground, expressed his hunger, and Myung-soo suggested they get a bowl of ramen, offering to treat them both. Muyuk was startled as he recalled that the date was September 21, 1990. In a sudden burst of urgency, he began to run. His friends watched him leave, calling out in confusion. As he sprinted, Muyuk's thoughts were consumed by the tragic realization that his grandmother, the only family he had passed away on this very day. She had died of a heart attack, and he remembered the somber remark that if she had been found earlier and an ambulance had been called, she might have survived. As Muyuk arrived home, he saw his grandmother descending the stairs. She looked at him and asked if school had ended early that day since he had returned sooner than usual. Taking his hand, she moved closer to him. Tears welled up in his eyes as memories flooded back, moments when she had fed, bathed, and cared for him. Overcome with emotion, he began to cry and called out to her. Gently, his grandmother placed her hand on his cheek and inquired why he was out of breath, wondering if he had run back home in a hurry and whether he had eaten. Still holding her hand, Muyuk cried even more as he tried to respond. Muyuk's grandmother asked him why he was crying and if something was wrong. Muyuk, his voice trembling, assured her that everything was fine and that he was just reminiscing about her. He hugged her tightly, overwhelmed with emotion. Muyuk, still weeping, held onto his grandmother's hand and guided her forward, urging her to go to the hospital. She was puzzled and questioned why she needed to go since she felt fine. Muyuk insisted that she might faint soon and that it would be better to have a checkup. His grandmother, however, expressed her disbelief, insisting she would only die after seeing Muyuk married and having children. Muyuk watched as she entered the kitchen and then sat down to eat the meal she had prepared in the room. As he ate, his grandmother sat with him, advising him to eat slowly and not rush. She expressed concern that he might have been starving for years and promised to bring him his favorite juice. Muyuk continued eating, his emotions raw as he reflected on the simplicity of the meal and his longing for his grandmother's care. Suddenly, he heard a commotion from the kitchen. Rushing inside, he found his grandmother collapsed on the floor, the juice spilled beside her. He called out in distress as she was taken to the hospital. At the hospital, Muyuk sat anxiously while doctors examined his grandmother. They explained that her condition was critical and that earlier intervention could have made a difference. They stressed the importance of immediate surgery to prevent her from slipping into unconsciousness again. Muyuk stared in shock at the coins he had brought and thought he was going to collect hundreds of billions not long ago, but this was all he had now. His friend Myung-soo, who had been with him, suggested covering the costs with the allowance he had received from his father that morning. Muyuk thought about Myung-soo's father, who worked in the large entertainment industry on Main Street in Nampodong. Muyuk vowed to repay the money, but his friend reassured him that there was no need for such concerns. He explained that the expenses for his grandmother's hospital care were necessary and not something to be repaid. As Muyuk thought back to the scene in which he inquired about his grandmother's treatment and medication, he learned that surgery was crucial and could not be postponed. Without it, his grandmother would remain slipped into unconsciousness again. When Muyuk asked the doctor about the cost of the surgery, he was informed that it would likely be around 10 million won. Muyuk, reflecting on how insignificant 10 million won had seemed to him before he died, realized the gravity of the situation. With only a few coins in his possession, he decided to take action. He entered a phone booth, inserted a coin, and thought it was the only way to get the surgery fee. He then made a call. He told someone on the other side of the phone and identified himself as Muyuk and also informed the person on the phone to tell Chairman Cheon that he had a message for him. Muyuk mentioned that he was the son of Cheon Misuk, the only son of his daughter, and expressed his urgency in wanting to see his grandfather. Wak stood on the rooftop of Dean Busan Hospital, lost in thought. He reflected on how, in 1990, there were no towering high-rises like today. The scene before him felt like a flashback to that era, making him wonder if he might once again be targeted for murder. His mind churned with suspicion and anger. He fixated on his uncle, Chairman Suman, as the prime suspect. Mwak believed it could only be him, perhaps even someone he had thought to be a loyal subordinate. He questioned whether the real culprit might be Kyan Swan or Kyan An. Who, he wondered, could be behind his betrayal? Despite his turmoil, Mwak saw an opportunity to take revenge. He resolved to dismantle the Kyan family and seize control of Taesin capital. As he mulled over his plan, a voice called out from behind him, addressing him directly. Turning around, he saw a young man approach who inquired about his name. Mwak, taken aback, questioned the man's intentions. The man seemed to be a figure of authority, accompanied by a stern assistant. The assistant questioned the young man's demeanor, and a thug standing nearby laughed, suggesting, "The sir you are losing." Mwak didn't answer him and looked at him with strange eyes. The stranger then reproached Mwak for his lack of manners, emphasizing the importance of respect towards those of higher status. Mwak, still puzzled, pressed for the man's name. The man, resting his head on a nearby bench with a condescending smile, revealed his identity as Park Dong-soo. Mwak was taken aback, realizing the gravity of the situation. He recalled hearing about Park Dong-soo, the second-in-command of the Saesam gang, dominating the young district of Bune. Park Dong-soo was a legendary figure who had joined the organization within 5 years and was recognized as the next gang leader. However, around 1990, during the crime wars, he had been framed for his boss's crimes. Despite the police's ongoing investigations, he was brutally murdered in a motel at just 29 years old. As Mwak encountered Park Dong-soo, who was holding a cigarette, he was confronted by the legendary figure. Park Dong-soo's mocking tone suggested that Mwak did not truly know him. Mwak, puzzled and sarcastic, questioned whether Park Dong-soo ran a comic book store. Park Dong-soo's assistant laughed, causing Park Dong-soo to become increasingly angry. He insisted that Mwak reveal his name, which led to Mwak identifying himself as Mwak. Park Dong-soo's attempt to pronounce Mwak's name incorrectly, alternating between various mispronunciations, only fueled Mwak's frustration. Park Dong-soo continued his taunts, disparaging Mwak and his situation. He asked, "Was that you, the rumored good kid from room 405? The hospital buzzed with rumors about you, about how you care for your grandma and did everything she needed." Mwak stood firmly, asserting, "Yes, they were my entire family because this was a natural thing." Park Dong-soo nodded in agreement and replied, "Yes, you're right. It was natural." "Did you attend school? Your uniform suggests that you went to Donggan Functional High School." Mwak, still standing, responded confidently, "Yes." "Were you a thug?" Park Dong-soo asked. Mwak replied that no, he was not a thug. He suspected that Park Dong-soo might have been stabbed and hospitalized. Park Dong-soo dismissed this and replied, "It's quite normal for men to get stabbed once or twice. A kid like you wouldn't know this, but grown-ups deal with stuff like this." He asked Mwak if he wasn't afraid of him, pointing out that Mwak appeared very correct and composed in front of him. Mwak replied, "Should I be afraid of you?" Park Dong-soo placed his hand on his head and said, "You are now pissing me off." Mwak approached him and asked if he could leave now that he had finished speaking. Park Dong-soo replied, "Yes, go ahead." As Mwak was about to leave, Park Dong-soo taunted him by twisting his name and added, "Take care of your grandmother." "See you later." Mwak felt a surge of anger at these words but continued on his way to his destination. Back in his grandmother's room, Mwak saw someone standing by her bedside. His grandmother, lying on the bed, said, "Someone is here to meet you." The director glanced at him and called his name, Mwak. Mwak thought to himself, "So this is the director, Kim." Mwak suggested to him, "Let's talk outside." They moved to a nearby coffee shop to begin their discussion. As the director presented his business card and identified himself as working for Chairman Kyan, Mwak, after seeing the card, thought to himself that the director was his grandfather's right-hand man and an important figure in the organization. He was someone Mwak could trust until his death. This was the same person from his past life who had informed him about his mother's father. The director told him, "You should come with me to Seoul." Mwak responded, "Why didn't the chairman come himself?" The director was surprised by what he heard from Mwak and said, "What?" He suddenly thought, what's the deal with his composure? Those eyes and that attitude are not something someone that age should have. It looks very natural, not fake. After that, the director said to him, "The chairman is a busy person. He doesn't have time to meet with you." Mwak responded, "I'm not asking him to meet me. I'm only talking about his daughter and my mother, Kim." Mwak thought to himself, "Of course, I know he won't come. He probably won't have the nerve to come here just because I told him to." He then said, "He didn't even visit my mother after her death. If the chairman wants to meet me, he should first go there." The director looked at him. Mike continued thinking, in my past life, I had no choice but to stay silent and do as they said because I had nothing back then, just an orphan with no future. But then, the memory of his grandmother's funeral resurfaced in his mind, and he recalled this director standing before him, saying, "We'll cover the expenses for your grandmother's funeral. After it's over, return to Seoul so you can be the chairman's successor. You don't need to worry about your survival if you do as he says." At that time, he had no choice. Without his grandfather's help, even if it meant dropping out of school, he would have been lost. But this time, it was different because now he knew him. Mike then stood up from the table and said, "If he wants to meet me, he'll have to come to me himself." He bowed slightly to the director and added, "I'm leaving now. Safe travels to you, director." As Mike walked away, the director watched him and thought, what an overwhelming presence he has. It made me feel nervous. Later, as Mike was walking down the street, the director looked out of a hotel window and pondered. The report I received described him as a troublemaker who picks fights everywhere. Did they misjudge him? He was the only son of Chairman Kyan's daughter and was not an ordinary boy. Inside the hospital, Mike told his grandmother everything. She responded, "What are you saying? The chairman wants to take you to Seoul?" Mike said, "Yes. I told him that he should visit my mom first before coming to see me. Her daughter died 17 years ago, but he hasn't visited her grave until now. It's very surprising." His grandmother then asked, "Son, do you know what kind of person your mother's father is?" Mike replied, "Yes, I know. He runs a business in Seoul. I called him on the number you had hidden from me. It's the same number you used to contact them, right?" His grandmother was surprised and said, "You have to be good to him." Mike responded, "I don't want to see him. He has ignored us for 17 years. The grandmother said, "Still, you can't do that, Mike." Mike stood up, hugged his grandmother, and said, "No matter what, don't worry about it. Just focus on your health. As long as I have you, I don't need anyone." Mike hugged his grandmother, thinking, "Grandmother is the one who loves me unconditionally. In the past, I sent her away without any warning, but this time, it will be different. I'll make her happy." Meanwhile, in a mansion in Seoul, Chairman Kyan Taeson sat in his chair and asked, "He said if I want to meet him, I will have to go to him myself?" The director replied, "Yes, Chairman. He said he will only meet you once you visit his mother's grave." Kyan Taeson responded, "Is he being absurd or just out of his mind? Well, he has succeeded in getting my interest. I will go to Busan. I will see what kind of person he is. If he can be used, I'll put him to good use, just like a pawn for my family." Mike entered the school and opened the door to the classroom. As he stepped in, his friend Mumu noticed him and greeted him warmly, "Hey, Mike. How's your grandmother?" Mumu asked, concern evident in his voice. "Thanks, Mumu. She's out of the hospital now," Mike replied, settling at a table and placing his bag on the desk. "I appreciate your concern," he added, showing his gratitude. Nosa suggested, "Since you just returned to school, why don't we skip class and head to the pool?" Mike shook his head, putting his books into his bag. "You were the one who said I was out of school for a while, and now you're suggesting we go to the pool? I think we should get ready for class." Meanwhile, his classmates, including Mumu and others, stared at him with surprise after seeing that he was serious about studying. "What happened to you, Mike?" Mumu asked, puzzled. "It's still 1990. There are 9 more years before the world ends. What's going on with you?" Mike said, "What's wrong with you?" Mike reflected on his thoughts that studying was not important to him back in high school. He only started focusing on it after meeting his grandfather. His mind drifted to a memory of sitting in the drawing room with his grandfather, his head bowed in contemplation. His grandfather, who had been looking at him with an intensity that Mike still remembered, once told him that his only goal from that day onward was to get into Korea University Law School. He likely did not have the slightest chance. His grandfather planned to use this as a measure to determine whether Mike could become a worthy person or not. Grandpa also ensured him that he was not left hungry while under his roof, but failure would mark the end of the relationship between the Kyan family and him. Mwak had taken his grandfather's words to heart, realizing that this was the only way to survive and earn his grandfather's recognition. He attended Korea University Law School and studied tirelessly, motivated by the need to prove himself worthy of his grandfather's expectations. From that point on, he was used by the Kyan family mercilessly as a blood-related servant. Sitting in a classroom, he realized that this time, things would be different. He was determined to study with a new goal in mind, one that would define his future. In the school, all the boys were talking and rowing around the corridor when the teacher suddenly appeared, waving his stick and shouting, "Get to your classes! The lesson is about to start. Why aren't you in your classrooms yet?" The teacher entered the classroom, and one of the students stood up to greet him, urging the others to do the same, saying, "The teacher is here. Bow to him." All the students stood and gave a slight bow to greet the teacher. The teacher then loudly called out for Mwak, causing him to snap out of his thoughts. He wondered what the problem was and approached the teacher. The teacher, waving the stick, placed it on Mwak's head and sternly asked, "How many days has it been since you last came to school? Do you think the school is just a playground where you can come and go as you please?" Mwak, trying to explain, said, "I'm sorry, sir. I was taking care of my grandmother." In response, the teacher slapped him hard across the face, yelling, "People like you cannot take care of your grandmothers. You must have gone somewhere to drink. How dare you speak like that? Now, sit down quickly." The teacher, still shouting as Mwak kneeled, began to think deeply about his situation and the reason behind the teacher's behavior. He recalled that his homeroom teacher during his freshman year had a notorious reputation, which was why he was given the nickname. Suddenly, the teacher slapped him again, asking, "How dare you look at me like that? Have you lost your mind?" Mwak realized that the teacher treated the students like animals. The teacher, with a threatening posture, ordered him again to get down. As Mwak lay there, he thought to himself that the teacher was barely over 30 years old at that time. Mwak also remembered another reason why the teacher treated him so harshly. The teacher had bluntly asked for a bribe from his grandmother when he first started teaching that year. His grandmother had almost given in, ready to hand over money, but Mwak stopped her from giving the hard-earned 10,000 won bills as a bribe. However, when Mwak refused to pay the bribe, the teacher saw it as an opportunity to torment him throughout his freshman year. All these thoughts and memories flooded Mwak's mind as he stood in the classroom, enduring the teacher's slaps. Meanwhile, the teacher continued to shout, ordering him to get down. Mwak quickly dropped to the ground, placing his hands and legs on the floor and raising his back. The teacher stood behind him, shouting, "Did you think I don't know about your actions? Boys like you grow up to become gangsters when they leave this place. Am I wrong?" Just as he was about to strike Mwak's back with a stick, someone entered the classroom, calling out, "Teacher Park." The teacher turned around to see the vice principal standing there. "What is it, vice principal?" the teacher asked. The vice principal replied, "There is a student in your class named Mwak." The teacher got confused. Outside the school, a large car pulled up, and the director got out. He opened the car door and called Mwak over to get inside. Mwak entered the car while students watched in amazement, climbing onto the school building's balconies and stepping out of their classrooms to see what was happening. Even the teacher who was about to hit Mwak stood there, stunned by the scene. The students nearby whispered to each other, "Isn't that an imported car?" As Mwak got into the car, he saw Kyan Taeson sitting inside, holding a newspaper. Mwak glanced at him, and Kyan, with a stern expression, asked, "Are you Mwak's son?" Mwak looked at his grandfather and thought, "The last I saw him was a day before he passed away, 20 years ago." Mwak responded, "Yes, my father is Kim Taso, and my mother is Kyan Mwak." His grandfather let out a small laugh and said, "You asked me to come and see you, so here I am." Mwak asked, "Did you stop by my mother's grave to see her?" Kyan Taeson replied, "Yes, I did." Mwak looked down and said, "I heard you never once visited her grave since she passed. I thought it would be better if you went to see her first before coming to meet me. And my grandmother, who raised me, isn't well either. I can't leave her behind. I can't apologize for this because this is clear." Kyan Taeson paused, looking at Mwak, thinking to himself, "Look at this kid. This young boy doesn't seem intimidated by me.
He then asked Mwak, "Have you heard about me?"
Mwak looked at him seriously and thought, I know him well.
He's a legend in the Korean private lending industry.
He came to South Korea during the war and started as a laborer, eventually rising to power within the economic circles of Seoul in the 1970s. There is not a single person, whether it was a chaebol or a politician back then, who had not borrowed money from him. Even in the 1990s, he controlled the underground money flow, influencing the country's financial transactions.
This is Kyan Taeson.
Then Mwak snapped out of his thoughts and said to his grandfather, "Yes, I know a little about you.
You run a business." "I've heard about it." Kyan Taeson responded, "I run a small private lending business in Seoul." "Do you know what a private lender does?"
Mwak looked at him with a sarcastic expression and thought, this isn't exactly a small business, grandfather.
Kyan, his grandfather, then asked, "You wanted to meet me. What is it that you want from me?"
Mwak placed his hand on his head, hiding his mouth with a thoughtful and sarcastic smile, hiding from him. He thought to himself, the only thing I want, grandfather, is the money that can bring the Kyan family down.
Mugak believed that the best form of revenge against the Kyan family was through money. He knew that a vast fortune would be inherited upon Kyan Taeson's death, and he planned to claim it all for himself. To achieve this, he realized he would need to secretly gather funds to fight against anyone who might stand in his way, all while ensuring the Kyan family remained unaware of his plans. As these thoughts consumed him, his grandfather asked, "Tell me, why did you want to meet me?" Mugak replied that he needed to borrow some money. His grandfather looked at him skeptically, thinking, so it all comes down to money after all. In the end, he's just another pathetic one. He then asked Mugak how much money he needed. Mugak explained that his grandmother, who had raised him for 17 years, now needed heart surgery, for which he required 10 million won. Additionally, he requested 1 million won each month to cover his tuition fees and living expenses until his graduation. His grandfather considered this, asking for 10 million won upfront and then 1 million won every month before agreeing to give it to him. However, internally, he thought, he didn't even have the guts to ask for more. He just called me here for chump change. Mugak quickly added that he wasn't asking for these things for free, he was merely borrowing them. After a brief pause, his grandfather laughed sarcastically, thinking, look at this boy. He can't even afford interest, and yet he's asking me to lend him money for school and other expenses. His grandfather, still deep in thought, said, it's not hard to get a loan, but loan sharks won't just let you borrow money for nothing. You'll have to pay it back. Do you have any collateral or some credibility? Mugak responded confidently, are you asking about my collateral? My mind is my collateral, he said, pointing to his head. His grandfather looked at him, startled by his boldness. Mugak continued, if you lend me the money, I'll attend Korea University Law School, and I'll use that as collateral to pay the principal and interest. His grandfather continued to watch him intently as Mugak thought to himself, in my previous life, he told me to do this, but this time, it's my offer. Kyan Taeson had a strong desire for academic achievement, but due to his poverty, he couldn't attain a proper education. As he grew older and his business expanded, he became more obsessed with his children's academic success. However, despite spending large sums of money, his children, Kyan Suman and Kyan Jan, barely managed to get into universities. Despite their best efforts, they struggled to succeed. Even though Mugak's mother had been accepted into a prestigious university, she eventually dropped out and abandoned that path. Mugak thought that his grandfather's desire for academic success could be an attractive proposition, one that might help alleviate his inferiority complex regarding his educational background. Grandpa looked at Mugak and pondered how serious he was about getting into Korea University Law School. However, he wondered how he could be sure, as he had heard that Mugak's grades were not good enough for admission. Was Mugak just bluffing? Grandpa asked him, how confident are you about this? What if you fail? Mugak glanced at him and thought, he has a slight advantage, but it's not guaranteed. For now, I need to go along with Grandpa's interest as much as possible. He then said, if I don't get into the university, I'll give up my head and body. Isn't that enough? Grandpa considered the idea of him giving up his body and then said, all right, that's enough. Mugak responded, but if I do pass, you might have to give me a present to congratulate me. Grandpa asked, a present? Is there something else you want? Mugak replied, I will tell you that after I get into law school. I am planning on asking for a huge gift. A look of seriousness initially crossed Grandpa's face, but then he thought it over, a faint smile appearing as he said, all right, I'll be waiting. I can't wait to see what kind of gift you'll ask for. But if you fail, I promise you belong to me, and you'll do exactly what I tell you, things that will make even the devil tremble in fear. As Grandpa's sinister side spoke, Mugak said, all right, grandfather. The car sped up, and Mugak watched it racing away. Standing there with anger, he muttered, this old geezer just wanted to scare me. As he stood on the school grounds, he thought, I'll turn them into fiends, grinding them into pieces, just as the Cayenne family wanted. The car raced down the road, and inside, Grandpa said to the director, he was a fun boy. The director replied, I was shocked too, since he was different from the reports I got. Cayenne Tayson remarked, I've met a lot of people in business, those who don't pay back and boldly come back asking for more. They even bring gangsters trying to threaten me. And those who threaten to kill me end up driving a knife into their bellies. Even people who waste their children for money. After dealing with such people for a long time, you get an idea of what kind of person someone is just from the first glance, their eyes, expressions, body language, and tone. But I'm clueless about him. I feel like he's judging me. The director noted, it seems like you like him. As the director continued driving, he listened to Grandpa's voice. Grandpa rested his head on the car seat and closed his eyes, calling out his daughter's name, Mizan, and then mentioned Diane Bowen Hospital. The director looked at him in surprise. Now the scene shifted to Diane Hospital. Mugak asked the doctor, please take care of my grandmother. The doctor replied, don't worry so much. This isn't a very difficult surgery. Mugak glanced at the operating theater where surgery in progress was displayed. He then walked through the hospital corridor, hearing a voice behind him, hey, Kong Mugak. He turned around and saw Park Dong-soo. Park Dong-soo wrapped an arm around Mugak's shoulder and teased, Kong Mugak, deliberately mispronouncing his name, are you going to school every day, eating 3 meals a day? You seem busy. If not, how about going up to the rooftop to smoke with me? Mugak suddenly became concerned and said, are you seriously saying all this to a high school student? I'm busy. I need to study. Park Dong-soo shouted, what are you talking about? Study? You said you wanted to study? Have all the fun you can while you're young. He shoved his hand into his pocket, pulled out a pack, and said, all right, if you want to study, I won't call you back. Park Dong-soo handed him some gum and said, if you feel sleepy, just chew this. See you later. He handed the gum to Mugak and walked away. Mugak, gripping the string of his bag, thought, at this point, Park Dong-soo is a well-known second-in-command of a gang that commands 100 members, but unexpectedly, he seemed pretty amusing. Soon, when war and crime are declared, Park Dong-soo will be dead. Suddenly, Mugak looked out the corridor window and saw some men getting out of a car, one of them holding a knife. Startled, as they entered the hospital, Mugak adjusted his direction and focused on them as they passed by. Mugak thought, Park Dong-soo isn't dying today. It seems I'll need to get him on my side. At the hospital reception, 3 men suddenly arrived and asked, where is the ward of a guy named Park Dong-soo? He directed his question to the girl at the reception, holding a box in his hand. The girl glanced at the box as the man placed it on the counter. She then asked, what's your relationship with the patient, sir. The man replied irritably, are you blind? I'm here to meet him. As he said this, Mugak approached from behind and asked, bending slightly, sir, are you asking about brother Dongsu? I'm Dongsu's younger brother. I'll take you to his ward. The three men looked at him in surprise but remained silent. Mugak, observing the scene, said sternly, how dare you punks cause a commotion in this hospital while my grandmother is in surgery? Get out of here. He then led them out of the hospital corridor and into the yard, positioning himself with his back turned towards them. One of the men, who seemed to be the leader, spoke up, what a nuisance. Where are you bringing us? Mugak turned halfway, casting a sharp glance at them, and asked, are you guys planning to kill Park Dongsu? At that moment, another man pulled out a knife and angrily demanded, who the hell are you, bastard? Mugak adjusted himself, preparing for a fight, and the three men advanced towards him, thinking he was just a kid. Just then, another voice interrupted, what are you guys doing? It was Park Dongsu. He shouted, you gangsters have no shame, pointing a knife at a high schooler like that. As one of the three men approached Dongsu, he swung his fist at Dongsu's face. However, Dongsu blocked the punch with his forehead, causing the man's hand to turn red as he winced in pain. Dongsu, with a calm and composed demeanor, kept his hands in his pockets and swiftly kicked the man to the ground. He then followed up with a punch to the man's head, knocking him down. The remaining three men watched in astonishment as Dongsu, exuding confidence, removed his shirt. The man holding the knife stepped forward, brandishing it as he advanced toward Dongsu. As the knife came toward him, Dongsu dodged it skillfully and knocked the man down with a powerful kick. He then grabbed the man by his hair and dragged him to the side where another goon held that guy. Dongsu, wearing sandals, kicked the man in the face with his left sandal, who was holding his colleague, causing his nose to turn red. Without losing his composure, Dongsu moved toward the man who attacked him with a knife and delivered a fierce kick to his ribs with his feet, causing both men who had been supporting each other to fall to the ground. The third man, seething with anger, grabbed a nearby glass window frame and charged at Dongsu. As the man attempted to strike Dongsu with the window, Dongsu threw a punch through the glass, shattering it, and delivered a blow to the man's face, sending him crashing to the ground. Mugak observed the entire scene, standing there as they walked through the hallway. Dongsu remarked, this is refreshing. I've beaten these guys recently before when we fought over a border. Dongsu added, I knew they would come looking for me while I was in the hospital. Dongsu remembered that thought about the scene when these gangsters entered the hospital. Dongsu's assistant, who had witnessed the entire scene, exchanged a glance with Mugak. The assistant understood and went to inform Dongsu. Dongsu then said to Mugak, I had already kept an eye on them, but you brought them here. You've got some guts, not even flinching when they pulled a knife on you. Mugak responded, I wasn't scared because I knew you would come. I even noticed that your underlings were guarding the hospital. Mugak could not intervene, but he knew that it would have been the outcome. Park Dongsu would have easily overpowered them. After this, Park Dongsu put his arm around Mugak's neck and said, I still owe you. Do you think I'll let you go so easily? Tell me one of your desires, and I'll give you whatever you want. Do you want money or women? Mugak, with suspicious eyes, looked at him, thinking, Park Dongsu will be the first tool in my plan. I have to make him mine. Mugak said, take your closest men and hide somewhere for 3 months. Dongsu, irritated, asked, what are you talking about? I'm asking what you want, and you're spouting nonsense. Why should I hide? Mugak replied, the president will soon declare a war against crime and order a nationwide arrest of all criminal organizations. Dongsu was shocked by what he heard and repeated in disbelief, war against crime? In 1990, the president issued a special decree to shift public criticism and the political situation due to various corruptions that had occurred under different regimes. A crackdown was initiated on 5 major crimes. In previous years, the president announced that next month it would reach a second level, a large-scale operation to eliminate criminal organizations and those small ones connected to these major organizations. Mugak advised Dongsu to keep the location secret and not to let other members of the same organization know, especially being careful of his boss, Lean. Dongsu was shocked by Mugak's words and looked at him in surprise. As Mugak was leaving, he said, "That's my wish." Dongsu watched him go, lost in thought about what had just been said. Mugak, on the other hand, was thinking that it was now up to Dongsu to decide. If Dongsu survived, he would surely be of use to Mugak one day. A month later, inside a house in Jiren Mountain, a TV was showing a report. The report stated that the war against crime had been declared and would eradicate criminal organizations. The Constitution had granted the president full authority to eliminate these organizations. It was October 13, 1990, and the announcement of the war against crime was being broadcast. 3 men were sitting in front of the TV, watching the news. One of them asked, "What is happening?" The second man, holding a newspaper, read aloud, "Every prosecutor and police officer has been mobilized, and all the organizations in Bu have been arrested. Even Sion, they were all gangsters." Their conversation was overheard by Dongsu, who was sitting to the side. Then these men headed toward Dongsu. Dongsu told them, "Don't do anything. Stay here and don't move around. This will cause unnecessary trouble. Understand?" They responded, "Yes, boss." Dongsu picked up the newspaper and looked at it, thinking, "What is happening? This is exactly what that kid said." Dongsu read the newspaper and thought back to the moment when he had asked Mugak if he was speaking nonsense and if he might as well wish for reunification. Mugak replied that this wish would be fulfilled by Germany, not by us. Dongsu saw the date in the newspaper, October 3, 1990, marking the solitary reunification by Germany. Dongsu was shocked and surprised by this revelation, realizing what kind of person Mugak was. Inside the apartment, Mugak told his grandmother, Grandpa was pretty quick in handling everything. His grandmother responded, "Mugak," but he interrupted her, saying, "Don't say anything. I've received this from Grandpa, who has come to see us after 17 years. I've also received living expenses from him, so you don't need to work anymore." His grandmother expressed her doubts, saying, "I don't know if this is right for me to take something like this." Mugak reassured her, "You've been through so much while raising me. You deserve more. Just wait a little longer. I'll make you more comfortable. Just take care of your health." His grandmother looked at him with concern, but before she could respond, Mugak's 2 friends entered the room, beaming with happiness. They congratulated Grandma, saying, "Congratulations. You've been discharged." Grandma looked at them joyfully and asked, "Look who's here." Mugak's friend, Minsu, added, "Look, Grandma, we brought pork belly for you. We'll grill the meat and enjoy the feast." Mugak was pleased to see this, and soon they all sat down on the floor to prepare for the meal. The scene shifted to Mugak with his 2 friends walking to school. Minsu commented that there was pleasant weather, but he said the fact that they were getting the results of their tests was weighing heavily on him. Ham, walking alongside, laughed at the situation, which only fueled Minsu's irritation. He started arguing with Ham, saying, "Don't laugh. You're no different from me." Ham said to him, "What are you talking about? I'm better than you. At least I ranked among the top 500 out of 520 students." Mugak continued, "Get out of here. I'm telling you, don't show off on me." Ham then approached Mugak and asked, "How did your test go? You studied pretty hard for this." Mugak replied, "I've just improved a bit, but still need to work harder." Mugak thought it was a bit challenging to return to education after so many years, but he managed to do a pretty good job. As they entered the classroom, another classmate approached Mugak and said, "Did you hear? You got the first position in the exam." Mugak was shocked and asked, "Are you serious?" The classmate confirmed, "Yes, I heard it from the teacher's office this morning." At that moment, another student entered through a different door and informed Mugak, "Our homeroom teacher is calling you to the office." Minsu, surprised, asked Mugak, "What's happening? It seems like you are getting a prize or something. Hurry up and go to the teacher's office." Inside the teacher's office, the teacher asked, "Do you know why I called you here?" Mugak was confused and saw the teacher suddenly stand up and slap Mugak across the face. Mugak's friends, watching through the window, were stunned and angry at the sight. The teacher then asked, "I will ask you once again, do you not know why I called you here?" Mugak responded, "No, I don't know." The teacher slapped him again and questioned, "What did you do in the exam? Did you cheat or something? Why are you now at the top of the second semester when you were at the bottom during the first semester?" Mugak looked at the teacher, noticing the marks of the slap on his face. The teacher was doing this because there was a reason behind his actions. Recalling an incident from a few days ago, Mugak and the teacher were sitting in the office. The teacher had mentioned that he had heard the person who came to school in a foreign car was Mugak's grandfather. The teacher told him that it was the right thing for his grandfather and that he should meet him since he was Mugak's homeroom teacher. Mugak's anger flared as he thought, "What a wretched animal abuser. He devoted to being a piece of trash for more than I remember." Mugak responded to the teacher, "My grandfather lives in Seoul. If you want to meet him, go to Seoul." The teacher questioned, "Will he come back again to meet you?" Mugak stood and bowed slightly in front of the teacher. Meanwhile, the teacher said, "Talk to him about me when he again comes to meet you." Before he even finished speaking, Mugak said, "If you're done, I will take my leave now. The exam is in a few days." That's why Mugak began to leave the office, heading towards the door. From behind, the teacher raised his finger, calling out his name. In the teacher's office, the teacher swung his cane and said, "Did you cheat on the exam, or was it only you and others who helped you?" Mugak firmly responded, "No, sir, I didn't cheat." The teacher rolled up his sleeve, showing his cane, and said, "Look at that bastard. I let you go when you created troubles, and now you dare to mess with the school exams. Did your grandmother teach you this?" Mugak thought, he is crossing the line. It's damn annoying. As he stared at the teacher said, "Why are you glaring at me? I will gouge your eyes out." Mugak said, "Whether I work hard or cheat, what does it have to do with my grandfather? Apologize now." The teacher slapped him again and said, "Are you crazy?" He grabbed Mugak's exam paper and declared, "I don't even need to check this. I'll mark it 0 for cheating." The teacher ripped the paper and laughed, "Starting today, you will be indefinitely suspended. I still want to expel you." Mugak said, "Do you want to bet with me?" The teacher, surprised, asked, "What bet?" Mugak said, "For this exam, I'll solve any questions you give me, just like I did in the exam. If I don't get the same score." The staff around the teacher looked at Mugak in astonishment. Mugak added, "I'll drop out of school myself. But if I get the highest score, you'll have to resign from the school." The entire staff in the teacher's office and the students outside were amazed. The teacher picked up his cane and said, "You arrogant little piece of." Mugak then grabbed the cane, preparing to hit him. Mugak said, "What happened? Are you not confident?" and shouted, "Bring me the test papers." The test began in the office. Mugak sat at the table while the other boys watched from outside, astonished. Mugak was done with the other subjects, and the teacher, holding the test paper, saw the perfect scores in every subject and was shocked. Another teacher came over and said, "Mr. Park, if he has taken the English paper right, his score will be perfect in every subject." Mugak said from behind, "I'm on the last question now. If I get this right, you will leave the school forever. If you don't keep your promise and continue coming to school, don't expect me to treat you as a teacher." The teacher, listening to Mugak's words, was stunned. The students and Mugak's friends outside were also surprised. Mugak said, "If you apologize to me now, I'll stop solving the questions." A teacher, enraged, asked, "What's this about?" At that moment, the vice principal arrived and said, "Stop right now. That's enough, Mr. Park. Stop this. Kim Mugak, that's enough. You've proven you didn't cheat, so stop now." The vice principal told the teacher, "You should also apologize. You should praise him on how he achieved such high scores." The teacher, irritated, listened as the rest of the staff watched in surprise. The teacher stood up and apologized to Mugak, "I misunderstood you." Mugak placed his pencil on the exam paper, slightly bowed, and said, "I'm going back to my classroom." As Mugak left the office, the boys cheered for Mugak, thrilled by the turn of events. If you like this video, please consider subscribing and like the video as a sign that you would like for me to continue.